All right, hello. This is Mr. Drogi, as you could probably tell. So you all voted since you weren't in class. Well, 5 of you voted. The rest of you should probably check Google Classroom more often. That you wanted me to either give the options were give a reading, or me do this, make a little video about what we would have covered in class today. The option was unanimous. All 5 of you that voted for the little video. So, very briefly, we are going to discuss topic 7.14. I really hope that this is not completely backwards like it looks like on my screen right now. I'm going to be so upset if it is. And if it is, then that sucks for you. All right, so 7.14, post-war diplomacy. This is where we are going to be talking about the United Nations, the birth of the Cold War, and the atom bomb, okay? Oops. So, key point. This is what you all need to know. So, Europe and Asia have been essentially destroyed due to World War II, okay? Keep in mind, there's zero actual fighting going on in America, okay? So our industry and our people are essentially untouched, all right? That's a big thing when every other major power in the world has been essentially destroyed or damaged in some way during the war. So what that means is the United States has emerged as the dominant global power. This is a big deal. Pretty much nobody can stand up to it. You got the Soviets, okay? But the Soviets cannot match the United States' industrial output. So America has emerged as the dominant world power. This gives us a lot of leeway to create our own version of a world order, okay? So, a lot of words. We don't need to care a ton about them. Just the two conferences that really set up the post-war order, we did not talk about them during our very brief run-through of World War II, are the Yalta Conference, which happens in 1945 at, you guessed it, Yalta. This is between American President FDR, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Okay, what do they talk about? Well, they talk about, hey, we're probably going to win the war at this point. Actually, they've known for a while. Dagan made me drop my marker there. How are we going to divide up Germany? Let's create the United Nations so that way they can work on the failings of the League of Nations. But what do they disagree about? They could not agree on what to do with Eastern Europe, especially Poland. Poland is that country to the east of Germany, to the west of what was then the Soviet Union. Both countries thought it should become a part of their empire, and they both hated the Poles. The Soviets really wanted to dominate and control Poland. The Americans and the British did not want to, because if you keep in mind, the whole reason Britain joined the war in the first place was because Germany invaded Poland. Okay? So, moving on to the Potsdam Conference. All right, this is pretty much like end of the war, okay? You get Harry S. Truman. Truman is the American, he was the vice president under FDR. FDR dies early in 1945, so before the war is over, FDR dies. Truman takes over, okay? So it's Truman, the new British Prime Minister, Clement Attlee, okay? It's no longer Churchill, and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin at, you guessed it, Potsdam. So, what do they talk about? They decide they're going to divide Germany into four, count them, four occupation zones. To the east, they will get, the Soviets will get half of Germany, and the west will be divided between an American, a French, and a British occupation zone. What an occupation zone is it's essentially a military governed area where the military or the nation that controls that area will establish order with their military and run things. It's basically getting Germany back on its feet and running. Also, they divide Berlin in the same way. So, this is where we get the division of Germany, where you get the West Germany versus East Germany, and West Berlin and East Berlin in the Cold War, okay? This is all feeding into the Cold War at this point. Next, They talk about what are we going to do with war criminals, like Nuremberg trials, Tokyo trials, things like that. And this is really seen as kind of almost a precursor, a start of the Cold War, okay? And it really shows how the two sides were disagreeing and fighting with each other. They did not get along. They were not besties. Okay? The common enemy they have, the Germans, have been defeated, and the Japanese are on their way out, so now they have nobody left to fight but each other. This is a map that shows the division of Germany. In the east, this giant red zone, this is Soviet-controlled occupation zone. All right? Green is British-controlled occupation zone. Blue is the French. Yellow or orange, whatever you want to say, is the Americans. So, Brits, French, and Americans are all allies. We all work together. We'll take these occupation zones and we will form the nation that is known as West Germany. Democratic, free, built like us, capitalist. The East, going to become East Germany, a Soviet puppet state during the Cold War. Okay? Communist, authoritarian, totalitarian, oppressive, all right? Not a fun place to live, all right? This little mix of colors right here, that's Berlin, the capital of Germany. Berlin is divided in almost the exact same way as the rest of Germany in Berlin, the capital itself. So West Berlin is an isolated pocket of freedom and democracy versus East Berlin, which is dominated by the Soviets. Okay? Berlin especially, and Germany, will become the main focus of the Cold War in Europe. If the Cold War ever went hot and World War III broke out, this is where we expected most of the fighting to take place. This is where the majority of NATO forces were stationed, and we fully expected Berlin to essentially be leveled. This is the result of these occupation zones is a reason why there was a big part of the tensions in World War II. The Cold War. Next up, this is a little map just of Europe after World War II ended. In red are areas dominated by the Soviets. We would say in the Soviet bloc. Okay. Eventually, you may hear the term Iron Curtain. Your homework is going to be, part of it is going to be examining that speech given by Winston Churchill, where he uses the term an Iron Curtain has descended across Europe. That is to mean that all these countries that the Soviets have kind of gobbled up into their sphere of influence and turned into puppet states. They control the government there. They have secret police. They have all the trappings of an oppressive regime. It's an Iron Curtain. People cannot go in. People cannot go out. Not fun places to live. Okay. Green are areas dominated, friends, besties even, with America, with Britain, France. Free democracies, okay? You would much rather live in one of these places than in one of the Soviet places. Thumbs down. Soviets, boo. Soviets are not cool. All right. This is Asia, okay? Asia did not get as divided as Europe did during the Cold War, but places in blue are friends with America. Red will become friends with the Soviets. But the two things I want to point out, okay, we'll point out North and South Korea, all right? North Korea, following World War II, Korea itself was occupied by Japan for several decades. So obviously we're not going to allow that to continue. So we divide it with the Soviets. The Soviets will control the North. We will control the South, like we split West Germany. So what ends up happening is the Korean War, which you all know, in the 1950s. We will discuss the Korean War later. Okay, this is Kim Jong-un, all that stuff. And fun fact, MacArthur wanted to turn North Korea literally into like a sea of glass and a radiated wasteland. And he got fired for it. Neither here nor there. We also get Vietnam. Vietnam is not officially divided by us. There's a whole thing. We're going to talk about Vietnam. It's still nominally under French control, yada, yada, yada. But I want to point out this map shows China in the same shade as the Soviets. A lot of Americans made this mistake, especially American military leaders and policymakers. They viewed communism and communist countries as a monolith, that they were all working together. This is not the case. China has a different version, a different ideology, and different interests than the Soviets. They do not always agree. And in fact, they had a huge amount of tensions and disagreement during the Cold War. They, in fact, fight a series of actual battles along their borders. All right? Just something to point out. All right, results of the war. Okay? Death toll, first and foremost, the easiest. So, 70 to 85 million are dead. This includes military. This includes civilians. World War II, more civilians died than military. And this includes the Holocaust. I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't right now. Second, a lot of Europe, a lot of China, Japan, Southeast Asia, and then pretty much all of Europe is just leveled. I mean, it is desperate straits. Cities are destroyed. They've become the targets of bombing raids and battles. I mean, the countryside has been ravaged, burnt, farms have been destroyed, bridges blown, railroads destroyed. It's not looking good, all right? So their economy and their societies are in shambles. Border changes. We already discussed a lot of border changes, okay? And then we get the two superpowers. We get America, the good guys, thumbs up, we like us. And the Soviets, boo, thumbs down. Soviets, thumbs down, boo, boo, we don't like those guys, okay? So, we are the two superpowers to emerge. Before the war, we could consider Britain a superpower. Post-war, Britain is not a superpower. Britain is a power, but they are no longer a superpower. America and the Soviets are the only two superpowers. And following the collapse of the Soviets, America, for a series of time, would be called a hyperpower. We had no competition, all right? Not accurate anymore. The other superpower in the world right now is China. Russia is no longer a superpower. Russia is a regional power at best, all right? Finally, the establishment of the United Nations. This United Nations is the successor to the League of Nations, okay? You're not very spot on here. Maybe a little better there, okay? So, the United Nations, it is headquartered in New York City, all right? It has things like the International Court of Criminal Justice, the General Assembly, the Security Council. We'll briefly touch on the UN in a little bit. Finally, the Marshall Plan. This is the United States of America saying two things. Number one, look, it's a lot like the Dawes Plan, okay, if you may recall, from the recovery of World War I and the build-up to World War II, when we said, look, let's help the Europeans recover, because the more they recover, the more they'll trade with us, and the more they trade and the richer they get, the friendlier they will get, and the more peace and democracy and freedom there will be. So, the Marshall Plan is that same thing, but for World War II. We give European powers that have been destroyed a ton of money to help them recover, especially Britain, France, Germany, Netherlands, the Low Countries. All right, we really want their economies back on their feet. We want them to be their economies to recover so we can trade with them. B, humanitarian reasons, but there's always a catch. We don't want people to starve, but we don't want them to starve for a reason. And 3, we are fearful that people who are desperate will turn to communism. We do not want the Soviets gaining an influence in these countries. All right? The Marshall Plan is highly effective. This is part of why we still have so many staunch allies in Western Europe. So, the United Nations, all right, this is the flag of the United Nations right here. So, San Francisco, I mean, one of the only good things to come out of San Francisco, that was a joke, I've never been, on October 24th, 1945, all right, we established the United Nations, all right? They don't meet for a little while after, but it's established, and, what was I going to say? One of their key components is this, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is the first international, all countries sign this, declaration of human rights. These are things like you have the right to an education, you have the right to life, liberty, okay, all this stuff, all right? Do all countries follow it? Heck no, all right? But this is a huge deal. And the first lady, she was the first lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of FDR, was a huge proponent of this. Eleanor Roosevelt is one of the greatest. She is the greatest first lady in history, like hands down. And she is also one of the greatest women in history. If you really want to read up on an exceptional woman, read up on Eleanor Roosevelt. She's awesome. All right. So, United Nations. Do they have any authority? Do they have power? Yes and no. So, one of the key things that everybody agreed on post-World War II was that the League of Nations sucked. It failed. It did not have enough power. So, how do we remedy that? All right? The United Nations is split into two bodies, the General Assembly and the Security Council. The General Assembly is everybody. Every single nation in the United Nations gets one vote in the General Assembly. One. Our vote counts the same as Laos. Okay? However, the decisions the General Assembly makes are not binding, meaning nations do not have to listen to what they say in the General Assembly. All right? We're going to compare that to the other organization, a lot like how our Congress is split in the Senate and House of Representatives. The UN is split the same way. The other governing body is the Security Council. The Security Council is much, much smaller. The Security Council, all right, primarily deals with, you guessed it, security. Things like wars, poverty, like, more heavy topics. They're very small. Off the top of my head, I believe it has, 12, 14, something like that members. There's only a couple permanent members. What the decisions the Security Council makes are binding. Every nation must follow what the Security Council says if they make an agreement. But here's the catch. It must be unanimous. If one nation disagrees with the Security Council, in the Security Council, if one nation votes no, everybody else votes yes, it's non-binding. The only permanent members are the United States, Russia, China, France, Great Britain. I think that's it. I want to say Germany, but I think that's wrong. Okay? And so then there's a couple other, every continent gets X amount of people, and then every couple of years we rotate in a new non-permanent member nation from that continent. Okay? And then finally, they have the International Court of Criminal Justice, which will try people who commit crimes against humanity, war criminals, things like that. And of course, the United Nations does have the authority to conduct peacekeeping operations. This is where you might see those guys in blue helmets in places like Haiti, maybe in Rwanda, all right? The United Nations does not have a military, but member states can be asked, sometimes they're obligated, they not have to send troops from their country in their military to serve with the United Nations, all right, for X period of time. If you've ever heard of the Battle of Mogadishu, like Black Hawk Down, that movie, all right, it was Malaysian or Pakistani, I forget, United Nations troops who came in and rescued the American Rangers that were trapped in Mogadishu. All right, a lot of what they do, though, is their presence. It's like a cop standing on a street corner. If he has to shoot a guy, he hasn't done his job, right? Well, not that. It's that his job, he's failed at his job of presence. It's the presence of a security, of UN forces that are supposed to stop the violence from occurring. That is the United Nations building in New York City. You can go visit it, take a tour. I recommend. You might think it's boring, though. All right. This is the General Assembly chambers. This is where everybody votes. Okay. And then this is a view of the Security Council room. You see, much smaller. All right. And then that up there is Ukrainian President Zelensky speaking to the Security Council. But see, here's the issue. Okay. So let's say the Security Council wants to say, hey, it is probably not a good thing that Russia is invading Ukraine. We are going to vote to order Russia to pull out. Well, guess who's a permanent member of the Security Council? Russia. So Russia says, no, we're not going to do that. And then, well, it's not binding, flaws there. Some people may think that the United Nations needs more power, all right? Some people don't. That is up to you. It depends on how much you believe in a united Earth, in a united Earth government. I think there's benefits and cons to both, right? All right, so Soviets get the atom bomb. So we don't like Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, okay? So we're not going to give him the atom bomb. We're the only country for a period of 4 or 5-ish years with an atom bomb, with nuclear capabilities. That's big, all right? It's like Teddy Roosevelt saying, speak softly, carry a big stick. That's the biggest stick you could carry, is an atom bomb, okay, at the time. So we're not going to give it to him. What does he do? He's going to steal it from us, all right? The Soviets have a very sophisticated spy network that we don't catch on to for a long time. A lot of the scientists who are working on the Manhattan Project, that's our secret project to build the bomb at Los Alamos, all right, are actually Soviet spies. So they pass on a lot of information to the communists, who then build their own atom bomb and detonate it in 1949, which is a shock to the nation. We had no idea. It was a lot like Sputnik when they put that satellite up in space. We were like, what? We could not believe that the Soviets had their own atom bomb. Okay? Shocking. All right? This really feeds into some of that Cold War paranoia, and now we really see we're like in the Cold War now. Okay? And there's the threat of nuclear annihilation, meaning mutually assured destruction. Any actual war between the United States and the Soviets will result in the destruction of both countries. Okay? Yeah. All right, last but not least, we're here seeing the birth of the Cold War. Yeah, America, at the time, we're led by Truman, elected again. All right? We are capitalist, all right? Business, things like that, and we're democratic. We elect our leaders. What do we want? We want to keep the atom bomb to ourselves. We don't like the Soviets. We want a free Poland. That was a big sticking point in the 1940s. And most importantly, we want to stop the spread of communism. We don't want communism to spread around the world. We will do anything to halt it. This is why we get Korea. This is why we get Vietnam. Okay, all these conflicts. Versus the Soviets. Right now, Joseph Stalin is the leader. He'll eventually die of a massive stroke in the 50s. All right? They're communist. We'll discuss what that actually means at a later time. And they are authoritarian, meaning they believe in a much bigger government than the United States does. They want to make their own bomb, which they eventually succeed with. They don't like us. They view us as imperialist. They view us as evil capitalists. All right? We're like completely opposed to each other. Really no reconciling. All right? They want to dominate Poland and Europe. And most importantly, the Soviets, they are communists. They want to spread communism around the world. That's a key core tenet of communism, is that it needs to expand. A world revolution, keep growing bigger. This is where the tension is in the Cold War. It is a constant game of chess between the United States and Russia trying to one-up each other, all right, during the Cold War. All right, I believe that's it for today. I'll give you a homework assignment. I haven't totally decided what it is yet. I hope your testing went well, and I will see you Thursday. Ms. Briggs will be in to observe, so if you want to get me fired, that's your chance. All right, toodaloo.